welcome back to the Covenant Eyes podcast. It's so good to have you joining us. Make sure you leave a comment, like, and subscribe. We love to hear from you all. Make sure you also share this podcast far and wide because today's episode is going to be stellar. We have an old friend joining us. He's been on the podcast for years, and every time he brings amazing information and research from his own clinical practices, and we're just really excited to have him. I also have joining me Theo, and you all know Theo well. He has been on the podcast over the last 12 months, and he is one of the hosts here, and we're just excited to have you back today, Theo. Welcome back.
Karen, the pleasure's all mine. I'm excited to be with you. Thanks for having me. How are you today?
Oh, doing amazing. Oh, my goodness. We've had a full day of recording today, so it's been fun. And actually, Eddie Capparucci is our final guest of the day, and he is a very skilled professional who is going to talk a little bit about some of the work that he does in his counseling practice, as well as some of the content that he's created in our very own Victory app. So I'm really excited about that, Theo.
That is fantastic. Well, let's hop right to it.
Yeah.
Eddie, thanks for being on with us.
Well, thank you for having me here. It seems like expectations are so high for what I need to say, so I hope I meet them.
You will. Awesome. Well, Eddie, for anyone out there that has not been familiar with your content, your work, give them a little bit of your background and how you got started really in the practice that you have now.
Yeah, I've been in practice now for 14 years. This is a God thing, strictly a God thing. I was in corporate America for almost 25 years. And as my faith continued to grow and to build, he finally tapped me on the shoulder and said, I have something different for you because I'm moving you away from corporate America and I want you to go into the counseling world. And after fighting him for a couple of years, which my wife got a big kick out of watching that happen, I gave in. And then I didn't even realize what it was he wanted me to do. I thought first he wanted me to go to seminary to be a pastor. And then found out and realized, no, he wanted me to be a counselor. So I went back and got another master's degree and did all the state work, got licensed, and opened up a practice, a generalist practice. Well, let me tell you, within a very, very short period of time, all these men started coming in that, were dealing with porn and sex addiction and different things. I'm like, oh my God, these look like me 15 years ago. And then it just all connected. I go, now I know what he wants me to do. So I went and got my certifications, and I've been working, as I said, in the field now for almost 14 years. I guess I'm best known for the development of the inner child model that I created. Because I'm a big believer in the fact that our past still haunt us today, and it's the inability to sit and process with a lot of subconscious emotional distress that drives us to escape through addictive behaviors. And so therefore, that's what the inner child model is about. One, educating men and also women now. We do it for women. And we've also just started doing stuff for betrayed partners. But helping them understand that their path is impeding their ability to heal today. And the big emphasis with all of this is with the inner child model, the idea of self-reflection, insight, answering the why question. Why do I think, feel, and believe the way I do? Because if I have the answers to those questions, I'm empowered to make not just substantial changes, but life-lasting changes. So that gives you a little overview of me.
That's fantastic. So thanks for sharing that. This inner child model definitely seems to have gained a lot of traction, but tell us what makes it unique and how does it differ? So two things I want you to hit on. And number one, what makes the inner child model unique, and what in regard to how it differs from traditional approaches, and then number two, how does it help the individuals you talked about who have sex addiction or pornography addiction or other such behaviors?
Yeah, well, Theo, it's a great question. And the thing is, how does it differ? It differed because it brings together many different types of other therapeutic approaches. Now, I did not realize this when I created it, and it was through one of my peers that we wrote a book about how the model works with all addictions. He is the director of the treatment of addictive behavior center in London, Nathan Jones, and he in his practice, he and his colleagues had been using the model for several years. I didn't even know this, and he approached me and said, "You know what? We use it for all addictive behaviors." So we wrote a book about that using a lot of these case studies. To go back to your question, I mean, it is part of, it has cognitive behavioral therapy in it, has narrative therapy in it, has schema therapy in it. There are 6 or 7 different types of therapies that come together that make this model. What makes it different and unique, I think, from all the rest is, number one, the fact that it has a lot of those different components. Number two, the fact that what it does, it really works on not just helping an individual to learn how to manage their addiction, because that's what we're doing. We're managing it. Okay, we're not curing it. We're managing it, but also helps them in learning to become more emotionally engaged, more aware of their surroundings, more mindful. And as we know, when it comes to sexual addiction, we're talking about an intimacy disorder. That's what Patrick Carnes, identified, decades ago. And therefore, many of these men I've come to understand in my practice, and many of my colleagues have confirmed it, 9 out of the 10 men I work with, they're emotionally underdeveloped. So this program also helps them in that aspect. To answer the second part of your question, it goes back to what I said before. What the model does, it helps the individual to learn more about themselves. And again, why they think the way they do, they act the way they do, and feel the way they do, and it is usually driven by their past. And what are the things that they got that they should not have gotten, such in the way of abuse? And what are the things they didn't get that they should have gotten, which was that emotional nurturing from people. So now having that understanding, because many of them don't understand that. They don't understand that their past is troubling them today. And 2, most of them don't know how to sit with emotional discomfort. And when we talk about emotional discomfort, it takes on a lot of different facets, including boredom. Boredom is emotional discomfort. They don't know how to sit with that. So therefore the model also teaches them how to do that, to realize I can sit with my emotional pain and then I process it. Because we go through this, think about it. What do people who struggle with addiction do? What is the coping strategy that they use? They escape. Right? That's what they're doing. They're escaping something. They're running from something. And with the model, what we're doing is we're teaching them to take those raw emotions that they're running from, and we get them to use my number one rule: slow everything down. Okay, that's my number one rule of recovery. And take all those raw emotions, process through those, and then put them to rational thinking, so that they can start to see what's the difference between what I feel and what is real. And the way they do that is that they're looking at it from reality. What they're doing, they're throwing out everything that's an assumption, they're throwing out everything that's fear-based, and they're throwing out everything that's an internal lie that they believe about themselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. And when you do that, what you do is you take this stack of raw emotions and you whittle it down to just a few. And guess what? You can handle that. You don't have to run away any longer. And that is the biggest key to the whole thing with the model. So that's the most unique aspect of the model. It is taking the idea of teaching people what they feel, those raw emotions, and being able to realize I don't have to run away from them. What I just need to do is put them in a proper perspective so that I then can manage them. So now if I don't need to run, if I don't need to escape, I should be in a pretty good place. So that's what this model tried to do.
That's
I know it's a
amazing.
very long answer.
No, that was extremely detailed, and I think it was really helpful for our listeners to understand that because you really unpacked it. I want to lean into the fact that you're a Christian therapist as well. So in your work, you also I would imagine integrate biblical principles as you're coaching and counseling people. How do you bridge the gap between the therapy side and the biblical side, or do you see that just kind of naturally building a bridge all together very easily because so much of what the Bible teaches us is practical in therapy?
Yeah, but my training was the integration of theology with psychology. So therefore, it never seemed to be, to your point, Karen, a gap. It's just
Yeah.
very natural for me to move from one to the other. And so therefore, what I use the Christian aspect not to shame, not to condemn, but to motivate and to help to build a sense of excitement for them. So therefore, I'm using the clinical practices or the clinical components to be able to say, okay, these are what one has caused the problem, and two, these are solutions that we need to help to reduce that problem. But at the same time, in order to be able to give you hope, to give you confidence, especially with that negative noise that plays in our head, those negative narrative, that's when I can turn to the dialogue of talking about Christ and talking about what Jesus sees the client. And because the one thing I like to say to him a lot is, you know what, we have to move away from how you see yourself to how God sees you.
Yes.
Because that is where you'll have so much growth. So again, I've never looked at it as there's a bridge or a gap between the two. It just seems to flow very naturally.
That's incredible. I love that.
I just have to observe. Either of you ever seen The Shack
Yes, I have. A long time ago, but I have seen it.
or read the book?
Yes.
There's a scene where I don't want to spoil too much, but the main character is asked to make certain decisions about his own children, and it helps him realize that God sees everybody in the world as his child. And so, I just can't help but see so much of faith as well as God's own vision of us in the inner child model. That's not to necessarily say we should see ourselves as children, although Jesus himself did say, unless you be like children, you can't enter my kingdom. But that just kind of stuck with me.
The thing is, if I can
Yeah.
tell you this, so how did this inner child model come to be the inner child model? And if just based on what you were just talking about, Theo, is the idea again of how men saw themselves who were coming into my office, I saw a lot of shame. And to me, shame, that number one deterrent that helped people to get to that sense of freedom. So originally, this began, and right now there are 12 inner children that I've identified, and the inner child's a metaphor. Okay, that's what it is. It's a metaphor for our emotional pain point. So I've identified the 12 what I believe are the most common pain point that we suffer from when we're younger. For example, the idea that, I'm unaffirmed, or I'm unnoticed, or I'm sexually abused. It's those types of things that we have, stress. So I came up originally with 9, and they were just the 9 reasons why men abuse sex. And I had a sheet of paper, and I had the 9 written on there, and I had a line or two about each. And I give it to my client to say, tell me, which one do you identify with? And they did, and we would go through those. But then I started thinking about, you know what? The shame that these men are carrying. What can we do to help them? What can I do to help them alleviate that? And I took an idea from another book, which I can't remember the title, and that was externalize the addiction. We're going to externalize it. So therefore, I said, you know what? I'm going to turn these reasons into children. And now the children are the area where the addiction lies. So once I presented that to these guys, it was like, oh my gosh, you know what? I can help this kid. I can nurture this kid. I can make this kid better. And that's what we saw. So to go back to your point of what you were just saying now a moment ago with the shack and such, part of the problem there when we can't accept how God sees us is because of the shame. And that is a big barrier that we need to break through. And I know there's been many wonderful books that have been written on the topic along the way. But you got to go beyond just reading a book to get to the idea of removing shame. You have to ultimately start to look at yourself differently. And I can think of nothing better, nothing more positive to help you look or feel different than to understand how God sees you and that God accepts you unconditionally and He loves you unconditionally.
Absolutely. And He took all of our shame, all of our sin, all of our guilt on that cross. That's something that we need to be reminded of, that He took on all of that for us to redeem us. And that gift is waiting for each and every one of us to accept.
Your problem is many people don't accept it because they don't believe it.
Exactly.
No, He did that for someone else,
Yes.
not me. You don't understand the magnitude of my sin. You don't understand what I have done. And it's like, brother, yes, I have. And sister, okay, because it's the same thing there. No, I do understand. I've been there. I've been down that road. But you know what? That is not, this is key. I don't like the term sex addict or porn addict. I don't like it. And it's not that I don't like it because I'm embarrassed by it or anything. The reason I don't have my clients use it is because that does not define who they are. Okay, that is not what defines them. And so therefore they need to find the label that does. Like for example, my label is I am a prince of the king. That's my label. That's what I wear. I've worn it for decades. And it's not going to change. Do I have an addictive brain? Yes. Do I have a compulsive disorder? Yes. Do I have an attachment wound? Yes. Those 3 things I have, which everyone who deals with this disorder has. They're all pretty clinical in nature. They don't define who I am. They're just things I have to take care of. So therefore, why am I going to walk around with a label such as a drug addict or an alcoholic or a sex addict or a porn addict? Again, that is not who we are. God did not design us that way. We are creatures of habit, and we are products of our environment. All right? We didn't come out of the womb like this. All right? It is through the scars, through people and circumstances that got us to where we are today. Not excuses. All right? I needed to make changes along the way. I should have made them along way before I did. I should have been able to pick it up and catch it long before I did. Not excuses. Facts. Rational. That's the rationale of what happened. The circumstances that led to the creation of almost a full-blown narcissist that fortunately got healed over 25 years ago. But this is what we're dealing with. When men can start to lift that shame, oh man, we see healing happen so much quicker.
And so that brings up the question then, so how can people, regardless of our listeners, those who might be carrying a lot of shame, especially due to their struggle with pornography, or if they're in a different place, whatever the case may be, how can our faith, our Christian faith, and how do you use in your therapeutic practice our Christian faith to get your clients or anyone listening? How can the faith help us see ourselves and each other differently?
Yeah, well, the first thing I do is I want them to start to understand what is all this noise that's up in their head, this negative noise. So therefore, we start to identify, okay, what are those negative narratives that you have? With many people, they don't, I mean, they may say it to themselves, but they don't think about it on a regular basis, but yet they feel it. So therefore, now I'm going to have them identify, again, name the pain, okay? I'm not good enough, okay? I'm stupid, or just go down the list. There are hundreds of different negative narratives. Once we have those all established, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them start to define for me, why should I believe that? And this is what they need to do for themselves. Why should I believe this? And it has to be something that they can factually prove. And in many cases, the other thing I asked them to do also is, where did this negative narrative come from? Where did it, again, we don't come out of the womb with this negative narrative that we have. So where did we get the sense or the feeling that I'm not good enough? Oh, well, my father was just constantly, criticizing me about this and that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right. So that was dad criticism. Do you think that was all justified? Well, there's probably some of it that would say, yeah, probably, you know what, we all can be justified in some way. But do you think you deserved all of that, what you got? No, I didn't. All right. Do you do nothing well? No, I do some good. All right, what do you do well? And so therefore we take and we are, again, flipping the script. We're going away from the what I feel, which are all these negative narratives, and we're moving over to what is real. And we're starting to get them to see things through the light of truth. The understanding also, again, how does God see you? God sees you, as that individual that He created, who He, again, accepts and loves unconditionally. He knows that we're flawed. He knows we're broken. Right? And all He asks is that we believe and that we repent when we make our mistakes. And with all of that, there's, again, that lovely word of grace. Accepting grace. And if I can accept grace to understand, you know what, I don't have to be perfect. It's okay to be broken. But I can also be on that pathway of sanctification where I am thriving to become better. That's it. I'm just trying to get better. Be better as a person. I may fall off the road. Okay. I get back up, dust myself off, and stay on the road. But people feel sometimes that they have to be perfect, especially those raised in very rigid religious households, with all the rules, all the regulations. And it's like, no, see, the thing about Christianity that's so wonderful is that it is so light. That's what Jesus said about my yoke is not heavy. And when people start to understand that, we're like, wow, you know what? I have that faith and believe in Christ that He is my Lord and my Savior. And I have to accept His grace. Wow, that's so easy. That's just way too easy. There's got to be a hook. There's got to be something else. And it's like, no, there isn't. There's nothing else.
It's so good, Eddie. The thing that a lot of people who are going through addiction recovery or pornography addiction recovery, they often talk about the experience of, and you mentioned this briefly, but, they'll get some progress. They'll feel like they're making, some headway, and they get a setback. How do people really work through that and not just, throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, because oftentimes that can be really discouraging if you fall and slip in your journey. But, like when you're climbing a mountain, if you make a misstep, you don't just go all the way to the bottom and start over again, right? You just get up where you're at and keep going. But how does that work in recovery? And what have you encountered with some of your clients? What does that look like?
I think the most important thing when somebody has a relapse is to be able to, one, take a step back. And you're right, it's devastating for them. I understand that. But one thing we as therapists need to do is not to be beating somebody up about it. Like, oh, I can't believe you fell. I really thought you were going to be good. No, okay, it happened. So what to me is the most important thing is, why do you think it happened? What went wrong along the way to get you there? And we're going to find in most cases, a large majority of the cases, is that individual was drained. Mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. In one or more of those 4 areas. Because when we're drained, guess what? We lose sight of everything else that we're supposed to be focused on, because we've now become emotionally dysregulated. I have come to believe, and I've been making a big, strong push with this over the last 6 months, emotional regulation is recovery. Think about it for a moment. If you're emotionally regulated, what could go wrong? Despite the circumstances surrounding you, despite whatever in your life is going on, if you're able to stay emotionally regulated, you can pretty much handle anything. And so therefore, what you're going to find is when someone relapse, they have become emotionally dysregulated. So therefore, it's now, all right, let's identify what the problem was. What could we have done differently to prevent it from happening? All right, what is the new plan to make sure that gets put in place? But most importantly, again, what are you doing to emotionally regulate yourself or keep yourself as emotionally regulated as possible? Because let's face it, none of us live in that window of tolerance 24/7. But if I could be there 85% of the time, and even if when I'm starting to get out of it, maybe I keep one foot in that center window, right? Maybe before, instead of getting hyper dysregulated or hypo dysregulated, if I keep one foot there, I can maybe move myself back faster. And in doing that, now what am I? I'm grounded. Grounded people don't relapse. They don't. Grounded people don't relapse. Emotionally regulated people don't relapse because they are very aware of their surrounding, of their circumstances, and more importantly, they're very aware of what's going on within them, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
That is so good. And, in the business world, one of the big skills that they really lean into is emotional intelligence, right? And so often in the business world, we talk about emotional intelligence and how that's such an important factor as you continue to move up in your careers and move on. So it's a skill that's appreciated across many different industries. And I think that that's interesting because I often think about my own personal experiences where, I have been dysregulated emotionally and responded, maybe to my spouse or to my kids and, in a not so gracious way. And really, and you take a step back and look at that, there was a trigger. There was something that, was off in my life that led me to be emotionally deregulated. So unpacking that with people has got to be powerful because once you can learn to master that and your emotions are no longer mastering you, there's so much that we can do. We can be more present for other people. We're more aware of how we're interacting with the world around us. It's just such a powerful principle, Eddie. Oh my goodness.
And what you just talked about, Karen, is so true, that there are driving forces that lead us to be dysregulated, but those don't always sometimes just happen in a flash.
Yes.
Sometimes they build upon themselves. So therefore, you're just slowly moving toward going up to be hyper dysregulated, or slowly dropping down to be hypo dysregulated. And what I did was I actually went and did certain research on, and I found what I thought are the 20, probably the most easiest, simple ways to stay emotionally regulated. And so I have a list of those, and what I do with my clients, I give that to them, and I say, I want you 3 times a day, proactively, 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, picking one of these different, techniques and using it so that you can stay regulated. So you can feel and say, oh, that's calm. That's what peace is. So the reason I have 20 is because not everybody's going to be able to implement all of them.
Right.
And there are some that take a little bit more time than others. Like, for example, immersing your face in a bowl of ice water. Okay, you're not going to be able to do that in the midst of a meeting at work. All right, that's not going to work.
Sometimes I'd like to, though.
Yeah, I'm sure we all would. But there's a lot of other things. Like, this piece of skin between our thumb and our index finger, where you can actually push it in a little bit, it's very, very soft. So to take your thumb on your other hand and just rub in a circular fashion, very slowly, and what it does, it just feels this calming sense that you have. And that's another one that's just there. So there's 20 different techniques that people can use. And I usually tell them pick 4 or 5, mix them up, and just make sure that you're doing it every day, 3 times a day, so that you are proactively regulating yourself. And then again, as I said, now you know, oh, this is what it feels like to be regulated.
That's amazing.
Because again, people who struggle with addiction, we're not very mindful of how we are doing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. We're just running through life with our head down. We need to stop, slow everything down, and be very, very aware of what is my mind, my body, and my soul telling me.
You mentioned the mind, the body, and the soul, and I just have to ask: do you consider or look at even what people are doing with their bodies, as far as what they're eating or how they're physically active or inactive in part of your therapy process? Do you have techniques that help them look at that? Because I know for me personally, if I eat a lot of carbs and get that glucose spike, it really can take me on an emotional roller coaster. I have to really regulate myself well, because I get spikes and I'm a little unhinged when I have too many carbs. I mean, and everybody's different, but is that part of the process, is helping people even assess that part of their body and how it's interacting?
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be, because there are many different factors to your point. In fact, if you're dehydrated,
Yes.
okay, it's gonna be play a havoc on your body. There are so many things that if we're not doing exercising, okay, if we're just sitting around all day long, that's gonna play havoc on not just our bodies, on our mind, and also on our soul, what our emotions. Too many people in those tablets, way too long.
Yes.
You've got to kind of put them away and really challenge yourself to find things that are intellectually stimulating for you. So yes, that's definitely a part of it. Again, that is the self-care that anyone dealing with any type of addictive behavior need to be engaged in. Because as I said before, between that type of self-care, where we are covering the gamut of how I can keep an influence, a positive influence on how my body, my mind, and soul is going, plus making sure emotionally regulated, again, that is recovery.
Sometimes it's so easy to forget that pain is actually a gift. It's telling us that something's wrong. It's telling us that there's something we need to be attentive to. But it makes total sense that someone who develops an addiction or a bad habit, I mean, that's really what they're trying to avoid the whole time. I want to pivot just a little bit here, and so for our listeners who are using Covenant Eyes as part of their accountability journey, how can tools like internet filtering and accountability reports be complementary therapeutic approaches like your inner child model?
Well, I think, those tools are like mandatory for the folks who are beginning the process of recovery. And the reason they're mandatory is twofold. One, again, it is that accountability. Two, there's also a sense of deterrent as they're trying to learn how to manage the compulsive nature that they have. But also, it's also beneficial for the betrayed partner to make them feel more secure, to make them feel safer, that they know, okay, you have something on your devices and you have this accountability partner who's checking on this for you. And I hope that's the case. I hope the betrayed partner is not the accountability partner. I don't think that's really a very positive thing for them to do. So for me, anyone who comes in, we have Covenant Eyes that's going on their devices. And do they need to keep it on forever? No. Most people don't. Some people do. Some people keep it on. They will always keep it on. Fine. But we don't always have to. But we need it there just to serve as that edge. Okay? To be able, because let's face it, what are we doing when someone comes into therapy? Discovery has just happened. Right? We need to provide a lot of education and insight. Plus, and this is the real key, is you have two very emotionally dysregulated people at this moment. Right? We are asking, the person who had betrayed to, hey, I need you to stay regulated. I need you to be calm. I need you to focus on your recovery. I need you to be engaging with your partner. And I need you not to run away from all this emotional distress to go to use something that you used to use to comfort yourself before. So we've taken away their number one comforting tool and we've thrown them into this hot pot of boiling water and said, hey, let's do this. That's why we need something like Covenant Eyes there for them. So therefore, because if not for that, these folks are going to be just, I got to run. Well, guess what? This is one place you can't run to. Because if you run there, somebody's going to find out, somebody's going to realize it. Yeah. So again, it just gives them an edge while they're trying to learn the skill set they need, and also to be able to uncover what are the reasons why I'm turning to addictive behaviors.
That's so important. And I love how you frame it too, that it's kind of the guardrails that we need during that period of time. So I think that's so beneficial. Well, as we bring today's episode to a close, Eddie, I would love for you to leave our listeners with a message of hope or some encouragement, and also point them to where they can learn more about you and your book and any of the resources that you have available.
Yeah. Well, I think from a standpoint of hope, I know what a struggle it is for many people, especially those who are at the very beginning of recovery, and especially the betrayed partners who feel like, is this ever going to get better? Is this ever going to, will I ever be able to trust again? And the answer is yes. Yes, you will, if everyone does what they need to do in recovery and healing in that process. And yes, it is time-consuming. It is difficult. I know for the betrayed partner, it's like, why do I need to do something? I did nothing wrong. No, you're right. You did nothing wrong. The reason you're doing it is because somebody hurt you. Okay, if you were in a car accident and somebody hit you, and you got hurt, it's like, we're going to say, well, you don't go to the hospital. You don't need to go because you weren't the one who caused the accident. No, you have pain. And so therefore we need to, because you need to learn how to emotionally regulate also along the way, because that is just going to ultimately help you, benefit you. Stay the course. That's what I asked. I asked, stay the course. It's going to be a rocky road, as you well know if you've been through it for a while. But also ask yourself this question, especially for those of you who've been doing this for 2+ years, 3 years, 4 years, and the work is being done. What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to ultimately accomplish? And what we're trying to ultimately accomplish is two healthy people being able to come back together and to develop a relationship unlike anything you've had before. Don't lose sight of that goal. Many people do, because they get so caught up in their resentment, in their anger, and their sadness, and more importantly, in their fears. Fear will cripple you. Please don't let fear cripple you. And if you want to learn more about the inner child model, you want to learn more about Eddie Capparucci, all my books, I think there's 6 of them now, are available at Amazon, exclusively on Amazon. If you go to www.innerchild-sexaddiction.com, innerchild-sexaddiction.com, you can find out more about the inner child model and what that entails also. Oh, and by the way, if anybody wants a copy of those 20 techniques, I'd love to give that to them. And you could do that by sending me an email at innerchildmodel@gmail.com. Again, innerchildmodel@gmail.com. And I will send that. I've given out, I think, over 750 in the last month and a half, so I'd love to have a copy of it.
That is incredible, and we will be sure to put all the links in the show notes, and we'll include that email address. So if you want to get your own copy of the Inner Child document that he mentioned, I think that would be a great tool to have in your toolbox. So definitely check out the show notes, and you'll find all the links there. Listeners, I just want to thank you for tuning in. I know that you learned so much, because I did, and it was a great conversation, Eddie. We are so grateful for your time, and you're just so wise and have so much knowledge. We're so grateful. Theo, it is always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Covenant Eyes podcast. Take care. God bless.